Hello, Marple here. Um, yeah, I wanted to talk about what's been happening with Orb of Creation and my emotional process with it, and just a couple ideas that have been spinning around in my mind. Um, so yeah, here's another development log coming at you. Yeah. So I've had an interesting experience in the last week and a bit. Um, yeah, there there has been like a lack of excitement for the project, and this happens. This has been like normal throughout my creative process. Is that like the excitement will be there, uh, and I'll be like working at it like a very optimized and like steady pace, and then the excitement isn't there, and I like slow down and I like let ideas come to me. And it's been happening a little bit again. There has been like a kind of a lack of excitement. So there's been like just a lot of just like sitting and being with it. But as I've been sitting with it, excitement is starting to arise again. But it is of interesting things. Logic states that I should work on continuing the content for the game. That I should work on achievements, work on optimizing some things about the UI so that like if I wanted to port it to mobile that it would be effortless. But my excitement's like, hey buddy, what about completely changing the UI? What about changing certain sections of the game again? Hey, what about like adding new mechanics? And it's always interesting because the it's like, do I follow the excitement that's like feels joyful and like playful, or do I do like the the meat and potatoes, the things I think I need to get done? And I enjoy playing in this space because I think I think the lessons I've been learning with this project is that following the excitement makes other people excited, makes everyone excited when somebody's following their excitement, and and I think that's true for this game. Is that like when I'm following my excitement, the highest version of this game comes out, and so even though it's not necessarily advancing the game, still is the ideas I'm thinking about. It's advancing like the quality of the work. So yeah, this is something I've just been thinking about. I'm still not certain on like what I'm going to be pulling the trigger on. Um, and obviously, I'm still going to be working on achievements and stuff. Like that stuff's still getting done. It's just like my excitement is pulling me in a different direction at the moment. So yes, my excitement has been excited about a couple things here. I have been thinking about a UI redesign. There's a lot of things that work in the current UI that I have been thinking about that perhaps would be better suited elsewhere. So, for example, I've been thinking about the orb's location. Top left, it works. It just represents a resource in that location. However, if and it's kind of like just a thing. It's a part of like the game that's always sitting there to send you that you're playing Orb of Creation. Well, I've been thinking about what if I dropped the orb right in the bottom center of the screen. So it's like something that's like really visible and it's really in your face. It's also something I can play off of. So when you cast spells, the notifications can ping off the orb, telling you what resources you've earned. I've also been thinking about if I hired an artist or I can purchase much more spell art and stuff like that. That if I could actually have like more generic effects for spells and have them like play on the orb, you know, I think that would be really cool if you hit like gather knowledge and like oh, it's magic circle came up and something happened. That's like not necessary stuff, but I've just been thinking about like what would the best version of this game look like, and so thinking about that because that stuff is not unavailable to me anymore. Also thinking about like removing the casting tab is another big thing. So I've been thinking about like how I can emphasize the spells on the screen at all times. The current version kind of like minifies it and puts it in the bottom left, which works, but I would love for it to be like a little bit more emphasized, maybe a bit more in your face. And that way, as well, when I move to mobile, there would be like a good UI where it's easy to click the buttons, because the buttons are a little bit small when it gets onto your phone. So that was one thing. And another thing is that I want more space for resources. So yeah, if I removed the big orb from that top left corner, I could fill in like another couple lines of resources. Maybe I can do something more with that too, of like having the resources be more condensed, maybe like having 2 columns of resources, things like that. Also, if I did redesign the UI, like adding a lot of quality of life things like drag and drop with the resources so you can reorder them, like all that stuff sounds really juicy. But yeah, that's UI. I've also been thinking about the Artificer tab, and all the artifacts, specifically. I talked about this last week when I was talking about having how artifacts, they don't feel quite right. They feel a little bit out of the way when I want artifacts to be like the main component of your Artificer skill. So, like, I want crafting artifacts to be like this cool thing that you're doing. I've seen some like cool suggestions in the Discord regarding like maybe you like combine components or something like that. I think something like that could work. I would love it if it was something like you're building huge pieces, like I needed to build the metal rod and then build the hammer for this or something, the hammer head. I think that would be really cool. That's still very abstract for me. The bigger thing I've been thinking about is removing artifact types. So removing conductor, amulet, cloak, ring, weapon as types, and instead relying on a artifact weight system. And I talked about this a little bit last week. It kind of functioned like Hollow Knight, where there's charms and charm notches. In Orb, I'd probably represent it as artifacts and artifact weights. So instead of having your artifacts restricted by their types, you could have mix and match any of the types as long as you had enough weight. I think this version has quite a few benefits. Having it by types means that I have to be very deliberate in my design. Like if I want a crit build to exist, I need to have crit amulet, crit ring, like maybe even a crit conductor to like really emphasize a crit build. But it doesn't always work out very well. Like for example, there's a double casting build where you can go like the duplicate staff and the arcane ring, and then you can duplicate your spells more often. However, one of the best ways to duplicate your spells is to combine it with the Scholar's Wand, where you're generating a ton of resources every time you duplicate a spell. But that synergy doesn't really exist, and you can't really explore that synergy because I restrict the duplicator staff and the Scholar's Wand as 2 separate conductors, which cannot be combined. So I love the idea of kind of just opening up that playing field. There is a sense that like the typing of the artifacts is like a large identity factor to the artifacts themselves. So I'm not like super certain about this change, but I love like the openness, the sandboxiness of like really having so many different combinations that you can play with. I love that feeling. So yeah, that was one thing I was thinking about with artifacts. I was also thinking about spell loadouts, and one of the main problems I have with spell loadouts right now is the fact that to put a spell in your loadout, it costs resources. Most of the time it costs mana. Other times it costs elemental resources like shock or blaze. This works in the beginning of the game somewhat as like you have to increase your mana pool if you want to get cooler spells on your spell bar. That makes sense. It like works. However, it has 2 drawbacks in that, first of all, it costs mana. So like when you're building a really cool loadout, you're just kind of sitting there for like 30 seconds at a time. You add one spell and then you chill for 30 seconds. You add one spell at a time. You add another spell, another 30 seconds. You add another spell, 30 seconds. to the point where most of the time you avoid adding augments at the beginning of the game just to avoid that like annoying waiting time. And like I added in a bunch of loadouts so that it's not as painful to like move around your loadouts, because you can just build a sick loadout and have it sit there. But there's still like the pain of swapping it, and I just don't think that is very effective. The other problem is with it costing resources is that it doesn't matter. Like exponentially, just the amount of resources it costs doesn't matter. Like after the first like 10 minutes of gameplay, no matter what augments you put on Gather Knowledge, you're just going to be able to do it like and recover your mana instantly. So this is why I've been thinking about also doing waits for spells, having like a spell wait for your loadout, and you can only have a certain amount of wait per loadout. So this is a cool idea because it kind of restricts what you can put in your loadout, so you kind of have to be more intentional on what you put on your loadout, and it kind of makes you it gives you another like obvious upgrade path where you can increase the amount of weight that you can have in your loadouts. And this is cool as well because the augments that you put on your spells will increase the weight of the spells you put on to the loadout. So you can be like more picky and choosy. You have to be more picky and choosy about what augments you're choosing to put on your spells, right? Do you want the quick on the Attune Orb, or do you want the quick on the Gather Knowledges? Right? Like if you had to choose between them, like that's a cool design feel for me. So yes, I like that a lot. I do want to be careful though, because the exponential like growth of Orb of Creation means that if that's something that also grows, it'll turn into like what alchemy is right now, where you can just get like 100, 200, all the way up to like 1,000 bandwidth if you really grind it out, which just like removes the idea of choice from the whole like system. Like as soon as you have like 200 bandwidth in alchemy, you don't really care. There's no choice. You're just dumping everything in there, and that's not bad, but I would like to keep it a little bit cleaner. There's something about it like being more crunchy when you actually have to make micro decisions that I think is lost in just the breadth of what alchemy offers. So I would want to keep it a bit tighter, and that makes the design of it a bit harder. And I'm like still playing out how that would work. Perhaps like expert wizardry is how you'd increase your loadout weights or something like that. Something harder to get, making it more meaningful too, really. The final thing I've been thinking about is enhancing and maybe like leaning more into the feeling of discovery in the game. There is this sense of discovery when you buy an upgrade and then like suddenly there's a whole new set of upgrades to unlock. I think that's really cool, but it doesn't feel quite right when like the spells that are available to you are just kind of like sitting there. Like there's something less exciting about just buying a thing rather than like it being discovered and then like used. Same thing with artifacts. They're kind of, you just click the button, you buy them. Again, it works, but I get the sense that I want like more of an exploration to it, like a discovery, like maybe some sort of randomness thrown in. I've heard some suggestions in the Discord about like maybe making like micro universes that you explore via space. And I've been thinking and playing around with that too. Maybe you like spend space to create micro dimensions, which inspire you to new spells or new artifact ideas or something like that. Or perhaps research is kind of tweaked into like research more spells. And so then like if you invest your research into spells, then you unlock more available options. Something that like adds more discovery to the process than there is right now, where it's just a little bit linear. Yeah, that was something. Yeah, that's thinking about. I think that's it for this week. Just lots of me sitting around and thinking. But lots of the percolating is very fun, and I'm really excited to feel out what sticks out of these ideas and maybe what comes through them as well. Perhaps how they evolve. And I'd love to hear any more suggestions you guys have. Yeah, it's quite fun working on this thing. Anyways, have a great weekend, and I'll see the rest of you later.